did we make it easy for the other person to say yes to our idea or solution? It's something that we should all aspire to always. What else could I have done to make it easy for the other person to say yes? If we can answer that question, guess what? Congratulations, you're a world-class salesperson. And you haven't sold anything. Meaning the person is going to sell themselves on it. And they're going to say, how much can I buy and when can I get it shipped?
This is the Storytelling for Sales podcast, a show about leveraging the power of storytelling to ignite your sales performance and grow your business.
Well, hello and welcome back. I'm your host, Executive Sales Trainer and Coach Ed Bilat, and we have an amazing guest for you today. I have met him originally actually about 10 years ago, believe it or not. I was an account manager for a national telecommunication company here in Canada, and he happened to be a general manager with one of the accounts in my territory. And I remember after a few trials, I finally secured that first appointment. We meet at his office. He takes my fancy proposal for 40 phones and he throws it in the garbage. And then he says this, Ed, I don't care about your proposal. I do care about you and the value you could potentially bring to my business. Let's talk. And this was like 20 minutes discovery call, which became a 2.5 hour, very deep emotional conversation, which had a profound effect and impact on my sales career and the personal growth. And yes, in the end, I was actually earned his business as well. So here we are. He is a world-class speaker, trainer to many Fortune 500 companies, global confidence coach, and a very successful serial entrepreneur. Ladies and gentlemen, Julien Leblanc, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you, Ed. I think I'm going to hire you to be the person that introduces me for every single gig or workshop that I lead. So a big thank you. And I'm really excited to have this conversation with you, Ed, because we both share a tremendous passion for storytelling and the power of it. So I really look forward to exploring that together today.
Yeah, great. I'm thrilled to have you with us today. I do follow your vlog on confidence on LinkedIn all the time, and I was absolutely captivated by your knowledge, your stories, particularly the practical application of those world-class techniques to real life. I was hoping that we can revisit some of them during our conversation, but before we do this, let me ask you our traditional question, which is, Julien, what business success story inspires you and why?
That's a great question to start, Ed. No messing around. I'm going to share two stories.
Two. Okay. So we get two, not just one.
Yeah.
All right.
And I'll tell you why, because I think one is personal and it's happening today and I'm still part of it. And the other one is an aspirational story that I think if you're a business leader and you have not read Shoe Dog, the Nike story.
The Nike story, yeah. Mm-hmm.
And you probably should stop listening to this podcast, go pick up the book and read it. The story of Nike to me is absolutely fascinating in terms of a leader by the name of Phil Knight, obviously with his team, challenging the status quo at every single moment of the journey and really rewriting a story, a business success story of what globalization could look like, because they were the first ones. And look, there's lots of lesson learned and they made a lot of mistakes and all of it. But it's just a fascinating story of growth, of humanity. I mean, if you look at what they did with Michael Jordan, Tiger Woods, Roger Federer, they were able to kind of be I would argue the trailblazers in terms of how you use influencers to connect a story to brand.
And the stories, right? Yeah.
Absolutely. It's all stories. So the Phil Knight story, Shoe Dog, phenomenal, takes you through an amazing journey. That for sure would be my first story. But the second one is the success story of HockeyShot.com. And HockeyShot, I'm a proud part owner in this company. Mm-hmm. And it's two of my friends, father and son, Paul Brun and JP Brun, that started this company out of New Brunswick, out of their garage. Yeah. And it's now an amazing, thriving business, $20 million in revenue and selling synthetic ice and training products to some of the top NHLers in the world, the top hockey players in the world, all the way to grassroots players in Australia. So why I share that is it's amazing how many parallel, Ed, that we see between a Shoe Dog story, even though that's $50 billion story, and the HockeyShot story. So I like to oscillate between, let's call it the best of the best in the space they play in, and the underdog or the smaller company that's trying to learn and trying to grow their way through. So those are two business stories that one I'm still part of, so I think about every day, and the other one I use as an inspiration.
Yeah, and of course, if you're wearing Nike shoes, you're part of the story as well, right?
And there you go. And they figured that out, have they not, Ed?
Yeah, no, I love those two examples specifically for applications because these are two separate stories. But I tell you what, you can certainly find the principles for these two stories, how the companies were built, how they operate, how they kind of go to business. And that will be particularly helpful to our listeners. All right, so let's talk about sales. So obviously, you have not been a world-class facilitator and keynote speaker and trainer all your life. You actually worked in sales. You've been on the sales floor for many years in many different positions, including some senior leadership positions. How did you even get into the sales world? Like, how did this happen?
Well, before I answer that, I do have to do a yes and to your comment there. Yeah. I am still very much in sales because even at Blueprint, as the person leading the workshop, as the one that is always selling the brand proposition, trying to make sure that our team has opportunities to impact our clients, I am constantly selling. And on top of that, being an entrepreneur, Ed, as you would know, we're constantly raising money. So I'm constantly selling. So I would argue I'm probably selling more than I've ever sold, even though I do spend quite a bit of time in keynotes and leading workshops.
Yeah, well, they're saying if you're married or if you have kids, you're in sales.
Right? So there you go. So let's be clear on that. And I'm very proud of that. I love being a salesperson. I know sometimes there's a connotation, but here's what I know. Nothing happens until someone says yes to something. Call it influencing, calling it selling, calling it persuasion. I absolutely love the art of selling. And at the heart of heart, I'm a salesperson. But your question, without losing the narrative, is how did I find my way into sales? Well, as a failed, let's call it tennis player / tennis coach, I think sales found me in a bizarre way. So here I am, done university, teaching tennis in Florida with an obsession around being around world class and absolutely loving life. And then there were some problems with my working visa for Canadians that want to spend time in America and for Americans that know, right. So Ed, I'm sure you've experienced that obviously as well as someone that's worked in different countries. So I came back to Canada to get the legal part of it done. And while I was back in Canada from New Brunswick, from Atlantic Canada, there's a little company by the name of McCain Foods that happens to be based in New Brunswick.
Not so little. Let's call it a $9 billion little company. 1 in 3 French fries sold in the world is McCain Foods. It's an amazing, amazing success story. And I still have the tattoo, if you want, the McCain tattoo. So it was a great place to be and grow up with. But long story short, I'm home at my parents' in the basement. Everything happens in the basement or garage, I think, Ed. That's where it all starts. And waiting for my visa to come through. Job posting comes up in the paper because back then that's how you would look for jobs. I'm probably aging myself a bit, but yes, that's how you did that. And there was a job to join McCain Foods as a retail sales rep calling on the grocery stores in New Brunswick. So in the McCain family's backyard, and that's where I was from. And the rest is history. I've been selling ever since. So I started in the food business, consumer packaged goods, and winning one store at a time, trying to get them to buy more products, put out displays, and everything else that comes with that game. So when you were getting to the sales game, what was the major challenge early on? What did you find challenging, transitioning obviously from tennis career to sales career? Now you combine both, but initially, what was the challenge?
Well, I'll tell you, it's interesting because as a coach, of course, I wanted the person I was coaching to like me at the core of it, but ultimately, that's not why I was there. I was there to help them unlock their potential. But as a salesperson, what I realized earlier on, because I'm a relationship person and I love humans and I just love that energy, I think my greatest weakness is I'm a pleaser as a salesperson. So I really struggle with that. And I still do today. If I didn't have processes and checks and balance and a great team to hold me accountable, I sometimes struggle to say no. And as a salesperson, there are times that you got to set expectations right. When it comes time to negotiating, you got to put the stakes in the ground. So I would say transitioning from being a pleaser to being a solution provider, if for lack of better words. Yeah.
Right. So to become a partner, right, an understanding and caring partner, but obviously there is a component when sometimes you have to say no, right? So like especially when we're negotiating, when we're dealing with objections, this is a critical sales skill. And you train many sales teams across the world. What are the most common mistakes you see, especially nowadays in this moment of time? Like, is there any commonality, anything we can help our listeners to prepare to watch out for, especially selling in the virtual world, right?
I can tell you, Ed, right now that I have a little book that I make notes for every call. Actually, I've gone digital now, but I take some notes. And one of the things that I write to myself quite often when I'm trying to influence, convince, sell, trying to move forward with someone is this. And it was Jeffrey Gitmer. I don't know if you read any of his books. At one point he had, I think, 7 of the top 10 sales book on Amazon.
The Red Book, I think, right?
Yeah, the Little Red Book of Selling, Little Black Book of Selling. Yes. Yeah. And he has a saying that stuck home, or that really hit home for me, which is, no one wants to be sold to, people love to buy. So let's just sit on that for a second. There's a big difference between selling to someone versus helping them buy. And I constantly remind myself of that. My job is to understand the need, create the need, ask great, thoughtful questions, listen with empathy, but let the person ultimately sell themselves on it based on the process that my job as a salesperson is to take them through. So that would be the best advice I could offer.
So if I understand it, so like a true navigator, so you're helping them, you're with them, but ultimately the final decision and the final move in their hands. So like this way, the buyer feels in control, right? So they're not being pushed to do something they don't want to. Would that be accurate?
Yeah, well, let's reframe that with a question. Here's a question, and you've heard me talk about this question. I'm very passionate about this question. Did we make it easy for the other person to say yes to our idea or solution? It's something that we should all aspire to always. What else could I have done to make it easy for the other person to say yes? If we can answer that question, guess what? Congratulations, you're a world-class salesperson. And you haven't sold anything. Like, meaning the person is going to sell themselves on it. And they're going to say, how much can I buy and when can I get it shipped?
Yeah, so very solid advice. So thank you. Thank you so much for sharing this. Now, you work across many industries, Julien. So like I looked on the Blueprint webpage. So like I think you guys had food, pharmaceuticals, high tech, real estate, education, sports. How do you pick your industries? How do you pick your future partners? What drives you behind that decision?
Well, I can tell you year 9 of the Blueprint journey. So what we do at Blueprint is we help companies and people unlock their potential, but more importantly, build their confidence. I joke, we're in the confidence business, right? Whether it's through storytelling confidence, selling confidence, strategic confidence. Initially, how we would pick our clients is you would lead a workshop, someone would leave that company, and then they'd call us and say, hey, could you come in and help us with our storytelling confidence or strategic confidence? Do the same thing you did with my team. So that was kind of the initial. We built a boutique firm based on referrals. Where we're at today, I feel very privileged and fortunate, super proud of this, that the team now is in a position to say, hey, we only have X amount of energy. Where do we want to spend that energy and where can we have the maximum impact in terms of coaching, leading workshops, delivering keynotes? So I would bring it back to the values that we have at Blueprint. So as a team, we've landed on 3 values. We've kind of said, look, we are very interested and energized when we work with people and companies that are purpose-driven. So let's start with purpose. Secondly, we love performance. There's nothing we love more than taking a company or a person that's already really good and trying to get them to level up. I think that's actually harder than when you're completely broken and you have to make changes, funny enough. I think it's a very hard challenge. And lastly, but probably in a way, most importantly, is the third value is positivity. We love surrounding ourselves with people that are choosing to go high when others are going low. We're not saying that we want to be around Pollyannas. We want to be around people that are optimists, grounded in reality. So ultimately, Ed, we look at companies and it's amazing. Your vibe will attract your tribe. And I think the people I've surrounded myself with and the energy that we're creating, we are attracting people, whether it's through the vlog, whether it's referral, whether it's people we meet. You know, hopefully when we start traveling again soon here, obviously for my American friends still in Canada here. So we're a little bit still in lockdown. And when we meet people that have purpose, performance, and positivity, how can we partner? Because we know that really good things are going to come out of that. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, absolutely. So I absolutely love that side of the story. What attracts you to the customers and how do you make a decisions? Okay, like how I think you use this many, many times. I look for the ways to chase the energy. Where do I find the energy across the globe? And this is where we go. But let's look at the other side for the customers, for the blueprint partners. Like what type of stories excite them? What do you find on their end? Because they would like your energy as well, right? So like ultimately, this is the ultimate exchange with the growth, right?
Well, look, let's bring it back to storytelling. Yeah. Proper business storytelling is going from the what is to the what could be.
It could be.
Because the what is, whether it's good or bad, they know what it is.
Yeah.
Why they get excited, I believe, part of our magic sauce, is we get excited about the what could be. We get excited about imagining the possibilities together. We get excited about standing in the future and then reverse engineering it and looking at, okay, what are the capabilities, behaviors, skill sets, stories that we're going to need to make that future state a reality? So ultimately, I think it comes down to wanting to stand in the future, wanting to look at the what could be, and then finally, that nice little injection of confidence, because I believe, and I see it in the participants' eyes, when we get to work with people virtually or in the physical space, they leave inspired and probably empowered as it relates to their confidence as a result of working together. So it's not us that's doing that for them. It's allowing the participants to go through the experience and the process to get to that place.
Yeah, very interesting point. You mentioned virtual selling, and obviously we see it more and more because as pandemic hopefully will stop, right? Will we go back full time or will be some kind of hybrid, right? So like, and we get this question all the time, like how do we adapt our sales strategies, our approach, whether we're prospecting, dealing with objections, negotiating or closing, how do we adapt to the virtual world? How do we make sure we're actually as convincing and understanding as we were face to face? How do you find that transition? Like any points, anything for our listeners?
Well, I'll offer up a couple of thoughts, and I don't think anybody's solved this yet, to be completely frank. I'm seeing best practices, but I think it's a human experiment here in terms of trying to understand even what is a hybrid model going to look like as we're working our way out of this pandemic.
Yeah.
Now, I think two things. Here's where I've landed in my personal construct is I truly believe that the questions are the answers.
Yeah, there is a book, I think, right?
There's a great book. It's funny you say that. Hal Gregerson, ex-executive director of MIT. He was the executive leadership director. He's now retired, but he wrote a book because he said, I spent most of my career trying to solve problems when really I probably should have spent more time thinking about the questions. So I think a great way to engage our customers virtually is solving a problem together through the power of questions. So how can we get a little bit of pre-time? Let me break down where I think selling is going to go in combination of virtual and physical.
Okay, great. Mm-hmm.
So a long way to get to the question, but here's what I believe. I think that there's a lot of positives coming out of this pandemic, not from, keeping in mind, this has been tragic, inflicted a lot of pain on businesses, people, mental health. Obviously, people have lost their lives, loved ones. So all of that, absolutely tragic. If I were to look at the little positives that are coming out for humanity is, if I look at myself, I was traveling so much pre-pandemic. I absolutely enjoy being home with the family every night for dinner. What used to be 3 days in front of a client, I think will go down to 1 day. So the first meeting, the prep-up meeting, will be done virtually. What a great way to take advantage of Zoom for 90 minutes. Let's define the problem. Let's look at the questions we want to answer. Let's form around the topic.
Yeah.
Then let's fly to the location. Let's have dinner. Let's look at each other in the eyes, build trust, have a proper meeting, and then let's follow up using the virtual space. And really, if you think about it, that's probably the way it should have been before. But instead, we'd fly once, maybe twice. Then we'd be afraid to tell the person yes or no, knowing that, well, they'll have to come and see us again. Suddenly, you're in a 1-year cycle.
Yeah.
So I think we can actually tighten up the process, still get that human interaction we crave. And I think the quality will even be better because we know, and let's not kid ourselves, it was getting harder getting FaceTime with customers in any industry pre-pandemic anyways.
Yes.
So let's dial up the quality when we're together. Let's make it an amazing meeting, amazing experience. But let's use Zoom and Microsoft Teams and whatever other tool, Google Hangouts, for the prep up and the follow-up to that sales call, to that meeting. So I don't know if that answers your question, and that's just me pontificating or sharing some thoughts around it, but I think this is a tremendous opportunity. And I think when we are in that virtual space, we just have to be a bit more thoughtful of how do we engage the audience by, instead of throwing up all over the other person by pitching ideas and going through decks, we just pause and answer a question together, or even more importantly, create a question together that we should answer.
Yeah. Asking challenging, thought-provoking questions is probably would be the key. We see this more and more across many industries, right? And sometimes asking uncomfortable questions, because at the end, as you mentioned many times in your vlog, the biggest value you could bring to a client relationship is, tell me something I didn't know, but I should, right? Tell me something I didn't know, but I should. And that's probably the biggest value creation piece which could happen. And to get to that, you have to ask challenging questions. So like thought-provoking questions.
Well, Ed, I can tell you that I just had one of the best sales meetings that I think I've had in my career. And it's amazing as humans, we're really good at debriefing when we don't get the result, but we don't debrief when we get the result. So in this case, let's debrief because it was a great result. And really, I think the success was, first of all, I'm a talker, as you know, Ed, and as your audience is probably seeing here today. But when I go in meeting, though, I do go into like listening aggressively, listening with intent, summarizing, but really making sure the other person is talking as much as possible. So we really anchored this meeting around 3 questions. And I'll tell you, man, I'm going to try this again in my next meeting. So the first question was, if we were to partner, what would we be celebrating together in the next 12 months? Okay. So we defined that. We said, well, we would celebrate because we've done A, B, C, D. Great. The next question was, what happens if we don't do this? What's the risk that we introduce, in this case, to their organization? Because obviously we were pitching some strategic thinking and then some workshops to this client. Okay. And thirdly, and this was good. Thirdly, I think it was really good. As simple as this. What can we do to accelerate the impact? Translation, what's a quick win we can get? Can we do a pilot program next week? Get the momentum. So we really started with, let's celebrate because we're going to make this a reality. Let's make sure we understand why this is important. If we don't do it, what are we putting at risk? In this case, there's a big problem with retaining talent right now. Funny enough, Ed, I don't know if you've followed some of the stats, but one stat I saw the other day that really hit home for me, it was from, I'm going to misquote it, but let's call it the North American Human Resource Association.
Okay.
And the stat was 50% of people, when surveyed, has said that they would entertain changing jobs in 2022. 50. 50.
Wow.
Now, part of it is pandemic. People are in a different mind space. Part of it is people don't want to travel anymore. They want to be able to live an hour outside the city, and maybe their company doesn't give them that. Maybe they've reevaluated things. Maybe they've changed priorities, family, business. But just think about that. We're still in the messy middle or the tail end of the pandemic. You would think people would be happy with job security, yet 50% of people said they will make a change next year if given the right opportunity. So what that tells me is the risk is if we don't invest in our people, if we don't arm them to be really good at what they do, the risk is they leave, and it's very expensive to onboard people, as you all know here, listeners, for those of you that have hired and tried to retain and engage and all the good stuff that comes with it.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great point. And that was part of the questions I was going to ask you next. Like, what challenges do you see facing today's sales leaders? So that's leadership piece. So,
well, look, I think that's an easy one. And I think that was there before. I've heard you, funny enough, Ed, so I think I'll quote you on this one. The attention span of a goldfish. Well, what's the attention span? What is it? Is it like 8 or 9 seconds or something?
Well, I think Microsoft did this study that the attention span of the goldfish is 9 seconds. So as a comparison, attention span of the human being is 8 seconds, right? So, and then Facebook just released this stat that during the pandemic, we lost another second. So we're down to 7 seconds. 7 seconds of attention, that's all you're going to get. So the comparison, goldfish is still at 9, right?
Well, I think you've made this question easy to answer because I think you've just answered it. I think the economy that we're moving into is the attention economy. Is how do you get people's attention? So the toughest thing for a salesperson the attention span is getting shorter on the other side. Too many distractions, getting pinged on your phone as you're on your Zoom call, trying to deal with your kids' homework is very, very challenging for humans. I don't think we were built to multitask. And unfortunately, all these tools, even Zoom, you're in a call trying to listen, and then you see all the chat stuff that's happening below and the sidebar conversation. So I would say it's getting people's attention. So it's hooking them, keeping them engaged. I think that is the biggest challenge that we all have as salespeople. But I'm still betting on humans. I think we adapt really well. So we're going to find ways to thrive. I'm not worried about that. But yes, getting people's attention is going to be a challenge.
Yes. And then, of course, the name of our podcast is Storytelling for Sales, right? So like it looks like a perfect getaway to plug the story, because I do believe that the story is probably one of the few things left where you can get this attention and keep it with a fascinating story. So as we get closer to the end of the podcast, so like I want to ask that question, like what does the art of storytelling mean to you, and how do you find it in the teachings you do, in the trainings, and being a partner and being a serial entrepreneur?
Well, I love how you framed up the question and started it with the art of storytelling, because I think great storytellers, it is an art form. It is like watching a great artist or watching a great athlete honing their craft. So to me, it's all about falling in love with the process of what it takes to deliver a great story. And I always use the famous quote from Winston Churchill.
Yes.
If I have an hour to talk, I'm ready to go. If I have 2 minutes, I need 2 weeks to prepare. So great storytellers understand that just because you have an audience, it doesn't mean they're there, they're nodding and they're being nice, but it doesn't mean they're actually engaged and truly listening and prepared to say yes or change behavior. So it's all about falling in love with the process and your craft. It is an art form. And the good news is storytelling has been around, as long as we can document human history. And I don't think it's going to go away. Yes, there's digital forms. Yes, there's different, whether it's Twitter or TikTok, there's different ways to storytell and express yourself. For instance, I've chosen a vlog that I use on LinkedIn. It's a great way for me to, first of all, challenge myself to become better as a storyteller, tighter, more to the point, try to capture the emotions, try to provoke, try to call people to action, all of it, and learning a ton, because when you put content out there in the LinkedIn stratosphere, you get feedback and then you learn and grow with your network. So all that to say, I've never been more excited as a storyteller. I joke that all I've done now is I'm trying to become a modern day storyteller. So I'm trying to keep in check all the fundamentals of storytelling that were probably the same from 400 or 500 years ago. Yeah. Did you hook your audience? Did you engage them in the story, make them feel like it is their story and their shape in the narrative? And then if you're trying to sell something, given that let's bring it back to selling, did you call them to action? Did you make it easy for them to say yes? And if you can put a big check mark next to those three, hook them, engage them, call them to action, then congratulations, you're a world-class storyteller. It's a pretty simple formula.
Beautiful, beautiful. Absolutely. So before we wrap up, I love the answer, but what's the best way for our audience to connect with you or learn about the vlog we mentioned several times? What would be the best way?
Yeah, so I love LinkedIn, realizing not everybody's on LinkedIn, but please, I would love to connect with you and learn from you more importantly. So I've got value I can offer in terms of ideas, but again, I want to learn from you. Secondly, Julien, so Julien at blueprintna.com. or our website, blueprintnorthamerica.com. Mm-hmm. And I look forward to getting to know you and learning from you. So thank you. You really got me thinking with these questions. So it's good. So I know that tonight I'm going to go home and say, why did I say that? Or I wish I would have said something different. But for now, I'm sticking to my story. So how about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So we will make sure that information is there. So thank you so much. There's been so many valuable tips. Guys, I hope you were taking notes during this podcast. We will put this information out. Again, a fantastic guest. I learned a lot just by the act of preparing for this podcast. You're already priming your thoughts, right? The way you're going to communicate. So thank you so much, Julien, for your wisdom, for your words, and primarily for your positive energy, which is needed than ever before. So
keep inspiring us, Ed, because I know you have tremendous passion for storytelling, and I learn from you every single time that we interact. So thank you for that gift, and truly grateful for this opportunity. So sending energy and positive vibes your way.
There you go.
Listeners.
Thanks again. So thank you.
Cheers.
Bye for now.
Bye.
That does it for this episode of Storytelling for Sales. You'll find show notes and links on our webpage, storytellingsales.com. You can subscribe to the podcast on iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks for listening.